Why was Rams general manager Les Sneed visiting the Texas Longhorns? And should the Rams draft a tight end in the first round? And Colin Cowherd said what about Puka Nacua? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do me a huge favor, subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. It's the fastest growing Rams YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, and let me know, do you think that the Rams should draft a tight end early in the draft, and who do you want to see them draft? My name is Doug McCain. Friends call me D-Mac. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, SI, Dodgers Nation, Bleacher Report. I also do NFL radio for Westwood One. Today I'm flying solo. The People's Champ, Mr. Travers, will be back tomorrow, but we've got a jam-packed show. We've got a lot of draft topics today. The draft is coming fast and furiously. Before we know it, the Rams will be ready to make that pick, and we'll be talking about that. Also, Colin Cowherd had what to say about Puka Nacua's announcement, really, the comment he made about retiring early at the age of 30. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, today's episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. GameTime, that is the spot for me. That's where I get my tickets. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, so let's talk some draft. And really, you look at this offseason for the Rams, their free agency, getting Davante Adams, that was the marquee signing. That was the surprise sign, the shocking sign for a lot of people. We had talked about the lead up to it because of what we were hearing and just the good, positive vibes from the Matthew Stafford decision to re-up here and essentially continue his career with the Rams under a restructured deal. That meant going out there and making some additions, and Davante Adams was that addition, but you also had the contract for Tutu Atwell, the $10 million deal. That really came as a bigger shock than even the Rams getting Davante Adams for many, just because Tutu really hadn't established himself as a long-term type of fit that it looked like was going to be a part of this offense, and a lot of that had to do with the game plan and Sean McVay and not getting involved and things like that. So some people were surprised to see the Rams bring back Tutu Atwell, but that does not mean that just because the Rams signed two receivers, Davante Adams and Tutu, that they are necessarily done adding skilled position players, adding receivers, adding a potential tight end, or who knows what else could they do to add some explosive weapons to what could be one of, if not the best offense in the National Football League. And the question is, where are those weapons at, and where are they going to come from? And it was reported that Les Sneed, the Rams general manager, he was in Austin to look at their pro day, to evaluate their pro day. And if you don't know, Les Sneed has connections with the Longhorns. His stepson, Tate Haver, is a long snapper for Texas, just finished his first season. And the Rams, they have a connection, right? Jordan Whittington was a former Texas Longhorn. And there's a lot of talented players that Texas is putting out. We look at their draft-eligible players and their pro day guys. Outside of Ohio State, Texas produced the most talent that's going to be drafted in the upcoming draft. So lots of talent down in Austin, down for the Texas Longhorns. And there was an interesting picture that surfaced of Les Sneed having a conversation with Arch Manning. And Manning, of course, is not eligible for this draft. He'll most likely be the first pick in the 2026 NFL draft. But maybe Sneed wasn't talking to Manning about himself. Maybe he was talking to him about his teammates. And one in particular that the Rams could draft is wide receiver Isiah Bond. And Isiah Bond is set to have a visit with the Rams. The Rams are one of 30 teams that Bond is going to be visiting with. And Bond is a very, very intriguing option. He is a player that has a lot of speed, a 4.34 for 40. You look at the vertical, you look at some of the metrics that surround him, and you wonder why he's not projected to go higher. Well, if you look at his overall production, the numbers that he put up in Texas, they weren't eye-popping. They weren't elite, and a lot of that, if you talk to people, has to do with the fact that they used him almost as a decoy, and the fact that the Longhorns had a ton of talent that was featured over him at times, but you still saw some incredible plays made by Isiah Bond. The speed is something you really can't teach, and this is someone that you could get somewhere in the 40 to 50 pick range, something in that world. So Isiah Bond's very, very interesting, and it wouldn't be the first time the Rams drafted a player a year in advance, because next year, Tutu Atwell could be gone. We'll see what happens with Devontae Adams. They definitely are looking at the future. They have eyes on the present, but they have eyes on both, the present and the future. So that's really interesting. And then outside of Isiah Bond, there's other guys that they could be showing interest in too. It's not just the speedy receiver. You got other guys that are on this team that the Rams could potentially draft. You have a tight end in Gunnar Helm who's really interesting. And he's someone that you're not going to see drafted in the first or second round, but you could see him drafted later. And if the Rams aren't going to get Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland, one of the top 2 tight end targets, and they do want to draft a tight end in this draft, then Helm could certainly be someone that they could pick up. And I do think it does make sense, especially when you look at the other needs they could have in this draft. If you want to go offensive lineman, if you want to look at the cornerback spot, there are some people that have the Rams taking Jackson Dart if he falls to them. So we know the Rams are going to take those quality players, but Gunnar Helm is someone they could take. Matthew Golden is another guy. Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba, Quinn Ewers, a quarterback, right? I mean, there's a lot of talent in Texas, and you look at a guy like a Barron, he's someone that could absolutely be plugged into the Rams star role. Matthew Golden is someone who also provides at that boost to the receiver position. And you look at Gunnar Helm, I mean, look at where the Rams draft from a tight end spot. You got Tyler Higbee on the last year of his deal. He's getting up there. He's dealt with injuries. Colby Parkinson was certainly not the player that they hoped he would be. You got Hunter Long is gone. So they definitely need to add a tight end in some capacity. And I do like the idea of Gunnar Helm. He's certainly someone that's really talented. But the one to really focus in on is Isiah Bond, because you already have a top 30 visit with him before the draft. And I think that the Rams have indicated that they do want to add some speed. They do want to add some playmaking, some explosiveness, and that was evidenced by the decision to move on from Cooper Kupp, right? And they want to open this offense up a little bit, and you do that with speed. And the thing about speed in the receiver position, let me look at Malik Neighbors. Look at some of these guys that year one, the learning curve in the NFL, it's greatly accelerated when you have a guy that can just blow past the cornerback that's defending him. And you do that with athleticism, with raw speed, something that can take the top off the defense. And what I like about a guy like Isiah Bond is he's not as slight of frame as someone like a Tutu Atwell, right? He's 5'11". He does have muscle to him, right? He's not someone that's going to get pushed around necessarily. And he also has that ability to stretch and take the top off a defense. So interesting stuff. And then, hey, who knows? Manning in the future, right? I mean, what does that mean for this team? Could you go after someone like that? We don't know how the year's going to play out. I think we all feel really good about where this Rams team is and the talent that they've surrounded Matthew Stafford with. And it is such a great thing that they are in a position to get right back in the mix to compete for a Super Bowl because of how well they've drafted in recent years. Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Jared Verse, Braden Fist, Puka Nacua, the list goes on. And that's going to be really kind of the big question is this a 1-year window, a 2-year window? And that's largely going to be determined on the success of Matthew Stafford and keeping him healthy and what this team does. But watch out. Les Sneed in Texas, looking at dudes, looking at guys that could help this team, looking at potential guys that could be with the Rams going from the Hook'em Horns to the Rams Horns, it'd be a nice little transition. But remember that name, Isiah Bond, and some of these other Texas players, because Les Sneed, he doesn't typically do that. That's not something that is the norm for him, just to go out there and go to college pro days. And he's a very calculated guy. Nothing's by accident. So I think this is worth a discussion, because when it does happen, if it does happen, we won't be blindsided by it, because we're following the Rams journey in real time as it proceeds. But coming up next, we're going to continue the discourse, the discussion on the tight end position, and an interesting way the Rams are evaluating their potential picks. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where GameTime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. GameTime Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. I just checked the GameTime app, and there are some amazing deals on some huge upcoming matchups. You got opening day in Major League Baseball, Dodgers, Tigers. You got hockey. You got the Lakers. There's so much to do in the entertainment capital of the world, not just sports, too. You got concerts, comedy. There's so much to do, and GameTime is the place to get those tickets. You got the lowest price guaranteed, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. And then there's the peace of mind. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Cannot thank you enough. You are the reason why this channel is what it is. This podcast is what it is. Your continued support. And if you're new to the channel, we have a lot of new viewers, new listeners because of the signings, because of the year they had last year. Join the Everyday Listeners Club. That's where you watch every single episode that we put out, Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekends, and then you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Okay, here in our second segment, we're going to talk about that tight end position. If you've been watching this show, the everyday listeners will know I have been pretty adamant on the Rams' interest in potentially getting a guy like a Colston Loveland and potentially taking a tight end early in this draft, just because we know that the Rams were interested in Brock Bowers last season. And yes, there's no tight end that has the upside and the generational feel of a Brock Bowers. He had a really great rookie season, but you need to fill the tight end position, one. And two, you're looking to add as many weapons as you can to take advantage of Matthew Stafford and the remainder of his career. Well, before we get into some players and continue that conversation about which guys the Rams could pick, well, I found this interesting. The Athletic's Jordan Rodriguez, she's top-notch, right? She is really the gold standard when it comes to Rams reporting. Does an incredible job for The Athletic. She wrote in her most recent piece about the Rams' process of drafting players and how they have created these buckets that they put these players in. And she wrote, on his screen, and this being a scout, on his screen, which the scouts cannot see, you talk about Les Sneed, right? So how Les Sneed goes about it. On his screen, which scouts cannot see, Sneed manipulates what he calls the call sheet. As they discuss prospects, the sheet looks like a series of rectangles that split players by position into different buckets. There are no round-by-round grades, only 4 overall tiers into which players are then, quote, bucketed. And then by mid-April, all draft-eligible players are split into 9 buckets based on the Rams' finished evaluations, which include the medical and character checks complete in March, and for some, notes from Sugarman's visits. the buckets aren't always rankings. Some are lateral to others. So players can be in different buckets. And here are the buckets. There's 9 of them. 9 buckets. The first one, bucket 1, math changer total package. Bucket 2, reliable starter. Bucket 3, math changer starter. Range of caution flags. Bucket 4, impactful contributor. Clean profile. Bucket 5, talented enough to contribute, less predictable. Bucket 6, trustworthy but less talented. Bucket 7, late IQ or PQ. Bucket 8, major concerns, off board or reconsider after draft. Bucket 9, likely drafted, not a Rams fit. So like Jordan Rodriguez pointed out, these aren't rankings. And really, they're not even necessarily a way to group these guys up in tiers. It is a way for the scouts that are looking at these guys to place them into future roles that they're going to potentially have in this Rams organization. So there are players that can be included in multiple different buckets. Rodriguez, she pointed out that for Puka Nacua, when he was a prospect, for example, he would have been in 3 buckets. Bucket 3, which is match-changing starter, range of caution flags. 5, talented enough to contribute, less predictable. And 7, late IQ or PQ. So that's really, really interesting. That's really, really interesting because it's a way to evaluate where they're looking at upside, right? They're looking at guys that, hey, who are the stars, right? Who are the superstars? Math changers, total packages, right? The bucket 1. Bucket 2, reliable starter, kind of role player type guys. So they have this way figured out. And the question is, when you apply this to the tight ends, who fits into that bucket 1? Who would be a Brock Bowers, right? A math changer, a total package. Well, you look at the tight ends in this draft, really, you could potentially make the case for Colston Loveland as far as impact, but the fact that Michigan did not have him block too much in the running game, he's not that kind of guy. He's more of someone that kind of lines up in different spots for you, and he can definitely make plays. He has got the almost hybrid type of feel of a tight end that can go up and get it. He's got body control. He's got ways to identify the ball and bring it down. He's got those ball skills, but his biggest skill is that he creates a mismatch because he is a little bit of a hybrid role, right? But he's also someone that is not the total package, right? If you want him just to be a crashing type of tight end that can go out there and hit blocks for you while providing what he also provides as a receiving level tight end, that's not what he is. So he's more of a bucket 2, right? A reliable starter, someone like that I think has moments where you're like, okay, because of the role that he has on this team, you feel really good about it. But really the only math changer guy, total package guy, is Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. Outside of that, that's pretty much it. And if you watch a lot of Penn State football, I mean, go back and watch the game against USC. I mean, the way that he uses his strength, his physicality to create separation, to fight and make those contested catches, this is someone that could be a multi-time Pro Bowler in this league. He doesn't have the explosion of a Brock Bowers, but we're talking about a guy that's going to be a vacuum cleaner. There's the way that he can make those contested catches. And also, he does what Loveland does in the sense that he does create mismatches because even though he's bigger and stronger and kind of has a bulkier frame, he still is someone that is very difficult to match up with. And I think for someone like Sean McVay, who really has indicated that he wants a dynamic tight end because of their interest in trading up for Brock Bowers last season, Tyler Warren is someone that from a hand standpoint, man, if he could get anywhere close to you with the 26th pick, or you could sniff him close in the first round where you could go up and get him, I mean, I love the value there. I mean, look what they did last year with Braden Fisk. A lot of people said, oh, that was too much of a package to give up for a trade-up. It was one of the biggest trade-ups that we've seen as far as compensation goes in a long, long time. And it turns out that Braden Fisk was the right choice, especially when you pair him with his Florida State teammate, Jared Verse. So Tyler Warren, I'm still – that to me, if you could get Tyler Warren at some – in some way, shape, or form, whether it be falls to you miraculously, whether it be a trade up for him, that 100% would be of interest for me. Now, that second bucket that we talked about, I mean, someone like a Gunnar Helm is really interesting from Texas. I'll never forget watching him against Ohio State. It was late in that game. Texas is driving, looking to tie. It's a 21-14 game. And he makes a really nice catch. You saw the athleticism, the range, the speed. And then he stiff arms the best safety in college football, one of the best players in college football, in Caleb Downs. And he points to him, and he gets an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty called against him, which set the Longhorns back. And then a few plays later, Ohio State's linebacker Jack Sawyer, he caused a fumble, he ran it back, and that essentially ended the game. So that, to me, is really interesting, is someone like a Gunnar Helm, just because I think that he doesn't have that upside where you say, oh, he's going to be a star in this league. But I do think talent is there for sure. And you also got Mason Taylor out of LSU, guys like that. So Colston Loveland is in that mix, and that those guys you wouldn't feel bad about. You would feel really good about it for sure. You really, really would. Then you kind of go later in that mix right there. I mean, Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. You got Mitchell Evans if you watch him at Notre Dame. I mean, there's guys Terrence Ferguson, if you watch him in the Rose Bowl, he's a guy, big physical guy, strong, competitive. There's other tight ends out there, but for me, if I'm going to go after a tight end, I really want to kind of go big at that position, knowing that you're getting a guy that's your present and your future, and then you're looking at this offense and you're saying to yourself, where are the holes at? All right. I mean, you don't have an elite left tackle, but Alaric Jackson has improved tremendously. You have Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, one of the best receiving doers in the sport. You got Kyron Williams, and I think next year is going to be a big year for Blake Corum. So I really like the idea of adding a dynamic tight end. The fact that you could potentially get a Tyler Warren is something that I find extremely, extremely intriguing. And I do think the Rams would be willing to do it. I really, really do. I think that there's a mindset for this team that's changed because of the fact that you have a lot of young players, but this window feels year to year. It doesn't feel like, oh, here's the 4-year championship window again, right? It feels like, oh, they were headed for maybe a rebuild. Then all these draft picks figured things out and emerged. Matthew Stafford is kind of like football's version of fine wine, the way he's aging. And then you get Devontae Adams to join you. And look, if they don't draft like they had drafted in years past, I would say no. Tight end is way too big of a luxury at that point, right? You can't go out there and get a Porsche if you don't have a functioning toilet, right? No, they got their house in line, and they've made really great draft picks that put them in a position to where they can select players that could be a luxury for other teams. So I think tight end still a position I would 100% consider drafting high with my first pick if I was the Los Angeles Rams. But coming up next, Colin Cowherd said, what about Puka Nacua? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So on yesterday's show, we talked about how Puka Nacua was on the podcast, joined the lobby, where he said that he wanted to retire at the age of 30. He's going to be 24 at the end of May. So if you do the math, that'll give him 6 or 7 years of NFL football left if he truly was seriously considering retiring at the age of 30, which is 100% something I believe that he might want to do. But here's what Colin Cowherd said about this. Cowherd said the injuries are something you can't control. It's a part of the game. And, well, this is what Nacua said. We talked about that. The injuries are something you can't control as part of the game, so you never know. Hopefully the rest of the career can go healthy, but you have shoulder surgery, you have knee surgery, you have ankle surgery. By the time my kids could be 18, I could be barely walking if you play the game and sustain all the injuries and stuff like that, but I want to retire early. So, look, he said he wants to have 5 kids, a lot of kids, he wants to be able to play with them, so that's kind of another reason why. And Cowherd said, Quote, I don't love it. NFL general managers, they're not looking for work-life balance. They're not. They don't care. They want you to be Kobe. They want you to be obsessed. They want you to be Brady. They want you to be Lamar Jackson. They don't want work-life balance. And I think it actually puts a light on Puka. What if next year he's got more than a few drops? Is that guy committed? Is he putting in the time? He misses a couple games in a row. Maybe he's just protecting his body over team. You introduce questions you don't need to introduce. Now, this to me is completely off. He would also go on to say, nobody's looking for humanity. They're looking for 18, 19 games, 120 catches, playing hurt. That's what they're looking for. It's not the end of the world, but you start talking retirement and you're already there. You can think about it. You can financially plan for it. I wouldn't discuss it. So I think that there is truth to, did he have to discuss it to kind of make the Rams feel like, really, are you talking about retirement, this and that? Look, I think you got to appreciate the candor and appreciate the honesty, and that's where he's at. But I don't think that this is any type of reflection on the work ethic of Puka Nacua, the style of which that he plays with. Find a receiver that plays with more reckless abandon than Puka Nacua. No, the reason why Puka Nacua gets injured sometimes is because he lowers his shoulder and he fights for those extra yards, and he's not afraid to make catches over the middle. Has nothing to do with that. He's not saving his body for retirement. I mean, have you watched the man play? This is absurd. This makes no sense. Cowherd went on to say, in 2 years, by the way, if you're sitting here on the draft board and you're thinking, you know what, maybe time to go first round wide receiver, if anything can hurt your leverage. So sometimes you just got to keep things to yourself. And talking about retirement at 23, I don't love it. Don't advertise it. Don't tell everybody in the room, your GM, your teammates, guys, I'm putting away a lot of money. I'm out here too. So look, I've been listening to Colin Cowherd and Dan Patrick and Jim Rome and all these guys since I was seriously like 5 years old. And sometimes, most of the time I agree, sometimes I don't. And I love these guys, but, it's kind of like I have these like personal debates with them in my mind about their takes. And this one is one that I debate them with, right? I think that there's some truth to what he's saying, but then the thing that kind of hits the most is the kind of suggestion, the suggestion like, oh, he's not playing at 100%, or he's going to save his body. That's not how it works. I mean, if you've seen The Godfather, what they say, you never want to tell anyone kind of what you're thinking. It's kind of, what does Marlon Brando say? Never tell anyone outside the family what you're thinking again. I'm a reasonable man. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse, right? You don't want to tell people what you're doing, right? You just want to keep the family business. So I think there is something to that, because it doesn't help him in any way. Like, the truth is, it does not help Puka Nacua in any way to reveal this. It's kind of becomes a story. Now when he goes to training camp, they're going to ask him about it. He's going to be answering about this throughout his career. So I do think it's something that he would be better served to keep to himself. But I also think that even if he feels this way, it does not mean in any way, shape, or form that he's going to play with less heart or desire or put the effort in there. I just know that Puka Nacua is a certified dog, and that's what he is, and that's what he's going to continue to be. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.